They show that manufacturing ecosystems can be built around African inputs and African demand so that more value is retained within our own economies. These are not isolated exceptions. They are blueprints of what we can scale together. If energy remains the backbone for transformation, then we must also recognize that the challenge is no longer only generation. It is in transmission. Across Africa, new capacity is being added, but without transmission, infrastructure power cannot move efficiently to demand centers. So transmission must now be treated as strategic priority. Private capital has a critical role to play here, just as it has in generation. And regional power trade must move from aspiration to execution. The same logic applies to transport and aviation, where infrastructure, cargo capacity, trade facilitation, and connectivity are aligned. Trade grows faster, tourism deepens, and higher value exports become possible. That is what systems thinking looks like. Not one project at a time, not one integrated ecosystem at a time. Nowhere is the shift from project thinking to systems thinking more visible than in the region hosting us today. Across Eastern Africa, we see a clear pattern, a focus not on constraints, but on building. Building institutions, building markets, building platforms, building systems that connect them. That's why I'm pleased to share today that AFC has reached an agreement with the government of the Republic of Kenya to establish its first regional office here in Nairobi. This is strategic. Nairobi sits at the heart of the region where trade, capital, energy, and industrial opportunity are increasingly interconnected. Establishing a presence here allows us to work more closely with East African governments and partners who are moving from plans to projects and from commitment to capital. It allows us to support what comes next: integrated corridors, regional energy platforms, industrial ecosystems, bankable pipelines, and domestic capital mobilization at scale. And let me, at this point, acknowledge with deep appreciation the representatives of the government of Kenya who worked alongside Team AFC to negotiate and conclude the host country agreement under the leadership of His Excellency President William Ruto and his economic management team. Please also permit me to thank Team AFC, the board and management of AFC, for their discipline, dedication, and sense of purpose in bringing this summit to life and in helping establish the foundation for our presence here in Nairobi. They have not simply organized an event, they have helped advance an institution's commitment to East Africa and to Africa's future. Your Excellencies, a summit like this should not be judged by the quality of its speeches. It should be judged by the quality of its outcomes. So when we meet next year in Abuja to mark AFC at 20, what must we be able to show for what we began here in Nairobi? We must be able to show that regional projects move from concept to execution. We must be able to show that capital was mobilized for infrastructure, not merely discussed. We must be able to show that reforms advanced to unlock pension, insurance, and domestic institutional capital. We must be able to show stronger coordination around corridors, power systems, industrial platforms, and regional resilience. And we must be able to show that this summit did not end in Nairobi, it began in Nairobi. And when we meet again in 2028 for AFC at 21, we should not merely show or review intentions, we should measure the momentum of what we have built. To measure what we have financed, to measure what we de-risked, to measure what value Africa has retained, to measure how many jobs were created, because African leadership in this room chose to align African resources, African capital, and African institutions around a shared purpose. That is how history is made. Not in declarations, in decisions. Not in applause, in execution. Not in what in promise, but in what we build. Africa has the people, Africa has the resources, Africa has the capital. And in this room, Africa has the leadership and institutions to bring them together. So the question before us is not whether the ingredients exist. They do. The question is whether we will organize them deliberately, courageously, and at scale. Because the future will not be defined by what we say here today. It will be defined by what we build together. Let this summit send another clear message across Africa and to the world. Africa is not waiting for the future. Africa is building now. The Africa our children will inherit will not be the one we hope for. it will be the one we build. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Samaila Zubairu. Our next speaker represents an institution central to Africa's collective vision and long-term agenda. As Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy at the Africa Union Commission, she is helping to advance the continental priorities that shape Africa's connectivity, resilience, and prosperity. Why don't we give a warm welcome to Her Excellency Lerato Mataboge to come and make her remarks. Karibu sana. Welcome.
Thank you, Program Director. Your Excellency Mzee Yoweri Museveni, the President of the Republic of Uganda. Your Excellency Dr. William Somei Ruto, the President of the Republic of Kenya. Excellencies, ambassadors here present, the Chairperson of the Board of the African Finance Corporation, Madam Ireti Samuel Ogbu, Mr. Samaila Zubairu, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Africa Finance Corporation, CEOs and members of the AMFI, and other distinguished leaders of financial institutions here present, Dr. Aliko Dangote and captains of industries here present, development partners, friends of Africa, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is a privilege to be with you today as we open this inaugural summit anchored on infrastructure as the engine for industrialization, with the purpose of attaining the Africa we want through the Africa we build. On behalf of the African Union Commission, I extend our sincere appreciation to the government of Kenya for its leadership and hospitality, and to the Africa Finance Corporation for convening this important platform. I also convey the greetings and support of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, who has underscored the importance of this summit as a practical consultative platform that reaffirms our collective commitment to Agenda 2063, which calls for an integrated, a prosperous, and a resilient Africa, powered by its own citizens' efforts and powered by African know-how. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we meet at a decisive moment. The global system is shifting, supply chains are being reconfigured, energy systems are being rewritten, capital is becoming more selective. In this environment, Africa cannot afford fragmentation. We must move with clarity, with coordination, and with conviction. The central question before us is not whether Africa should industrialize. It is whether we will organize our infrastructure, our capital, and our policies to make that industrialization inevitable. The status quo is that less than 35% of Africa's roads are paved, contributing to some of the highest logistics costs globally. Rail networks remain limited and often disconnected. Ports and airports exist, but too often they do not function as seamless gateways to regional markets. In energy, millions of African households still lack access to electricity, and many industries continue to operate with fragmented and unreliable power systems. Without dependable energy, industrialization can never take root. Without industrialization, employment can never scale. Excellencies, Africa is not constrained by potential. It is constrained by alignment. We have capital. I think the CEO made the point very emphatically. We have the capital. Africa's domestic capital market, capital base now exceeds trillions of dollars. We have markets under the African Continental Free Trade Area, but these elements are not sufficiently connected to create productive capacity at scale. This is why we must fundamentally shift how we think about infrastructure. Infrastructure must move from assets to systems. Ports, rail, roads, power, and digital networks must function together as integrated economic corridors that connect production zones to markets. Today, too much of our value still leaves the continent in raw form and returns at a premium. This is not because Africa lacks the resources or the markets, it's because we have not fully aligned infrastructure, capital, and policy to support industrial value chains. That needs to change. We need to move from extraction to transformation, from exporting commodities to building industries, from fragmented national projects to coordinated continental systems. This is the agenda that the African Union is advancing. Through the Programme for Infrastructure Development in Africa, we are coordinating cross-border investments in transport, energy, and water systems. Through the Trans-African Highways and the African Integrated Rail Network, we are connecting regions to markets. Through the single air transport market, we are unlocking mobility and trade. Through the African Single Electricity Market and the Continental Power Systems Master Plan, we are building an integrated energy system capable of powering industry at scale. And through the Digital Transformation Strategy for Africa, we are ensuring that digital infrastructure becomes a driver of productivity, innovation, and competitiveness. Frameworks alone will not deliver transformation. We have enough frameworks as the African Union Commission. Execution will deliver transformation. And this is why a summit such as this matters. It is not simply a gathering, it is a platform for alignment. A space where governments, financiers, and the private sector come together, not to discuss what is possible, but to commit to what must be delivered. The African Union Commission stands ready to be a strategic pillar in future iterations of this summit towards the Africa we build for the Africa we want. I congratulate, on behalf of the Commission, the Government of Kenya and the leadership of the African Finance Corporation for this visionary platform. We further look forward to this summit and this gathering's support towards actualizing the African Union's theme of the year of 2027, that is going to be leveraging the full potential of the single African air transport market and new technologies for continental integration. Improving our aviation connectivity can shift the needle on intra-Africa trade through cargo movement, including delivering continental integration in real terms. The African Union counts on all of your continued support in connecting Africa. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency Lerato Mataboge, for those comments. We now turn our attention to the host country. Kenya has positioned itself at the center of some of the most important conversations on Africa's transformation and a regional powerhouse. Your Excellencies, allow me to now invite Honorable John Badi, Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury and Economic Planning, to make his remarks. Let's give him a clap as he is coming. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, President William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Uganda, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, other representatives of heads of state, president and government, the CEO and President of African Finance Corporation, Samaila Zubairu, Excellencies, Ministers and Heads of Delegations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great honor and privilege to welcome you to the Africa We Build Summit of 2026. This important summit provides a unique platform for dialogue and collaboration, which is aimed at accelerating the mobilization of capital for strategic infrastructure investments across the African continent. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa continues to face a persistent infrastructure financing gap with critical shortages in key sectors such as energy, transport, and digital connectivity. These gaps constrain economic growth, limit productivity, and slow our collective development ambitions. Kenya, like many countries across the continent, experiences similar infrastructure challenges, which remain a binding constraint to growth, even as our social sectors continue to require sustained and inclusive investment. Despite the urgent demand for infrastructure development, governments across Africa are compelled to navigate a delicate balance, operating within the realities of prevailing macroeconomic conditions and fiscal pressures. Using Kenya as an illustrative example, our fiscal position presents real constraints on policy choices. Public debt currently stands at approximately 65 to 67% of our GDP, with the debt service obligations consuming about 50% of our ordinary revenue. At the same time, our tax to GDP ratio remains in the mid-teens, reflecting both structural economic factors and the social and political limits of taxation. Compounding these challenges, global financial conditions have also tightened, making borrowing more expensive, less predictable, and increasingly restrictive for developing economies. This mismatch between infrastructure expectations and fiscal capacity underscores an urgent need for new and innovative approaches to development finance. And I would request to pause there and just mention the way we look at infrastructure in Kenya, and more particularly the corridor, is that the corridor is not a route. Corridor is not about rails. It's not about roads. Corridor is an integrated system. It is an economic ecosystem. It is about production. It is about industrialization. It is about value addition. It's about employment creation. It is about prosperity, in summary. And that is why we have a holistic approach to our development initiatives. We are looking at how to integrate various infrastructure projects, because I will tell you that corridor does not start at the port. It doesn't start at our airports. It actually starts at the farm. It starts at the factory, and it starts at the production centers. It is how you connect production centers to markets that is what is important. That is why you must also remember, as you do the rails, as you do airways, airports, as you do trunk roads, that feeder roads are equally important. So you must have a system where feeder roads connect to trunk roads connect to meter gauge railway, because standard gauge railway should not be a replacement of meter gauge railway, but should be blending and integrating with meter gauge railway. Then meter gauge railway should lead you to a dry port, which then should connect through SGR to seaports and airports. That is when now you have a corridor that is complete, a corridor that gives value, a corridor that moves you from rhetoric to deliveries, because what we need is not political statements. It's not about rhetoric. It's about delivery. But this requires bold and sometimes uncomfortable decisions have to be made. And therefore, we require bold and courageous leaders in this space. I want to just summarize it by saying that I think the problem that we have been undergoing is that we are trying to do 21st century infrastructure development by using 20th century financing models. That is why we are still thinking about the traditional ways of raising funds. I want to say that this summit could not be more timely. The Africa We Build Summit offers an opportunity to rethink the continent's development finance paradigm by aligning Africa's long-term capital with the continent's vast infrastructure needs. In Kenya, we have already embarked on this transition by shifting away from traditional debt-heavy public financing models and embracing blended investment-led approaches. A key example is the recent establishment of the National Infrastructure Fund, a fund that we have established within an initial capital or seed capital of about $3 billion US, which resources we have sourced or raised from divestiture and privatization of capital assets or public capital assets. This is a fund that is designed to mobilize capital for commercially viable public infrastructure projects. We are trying to optimize the assets that we have, and this is going to help. This infrastructure fund is going to help in project development, in project designs, in project preparation, feasibility study, economic, social, and impact assessment, procurement process, up to execution. We are also advancing other innovative financing mechanisms, including securitization, more particularly in the road sector. This is what we call an intelligent and integrated optimization of the use of our assets. And I want to put it this way, that we are looking at a country, and we are looking at a region, and we are looking at a continent that will use its assets and not rely on others to optimize the use of those assets and to use the proceeds of those assets for risk restructuring and risk reallocation or allocation. I want to also add the last, which is the revitalization of public-private partnership frameworks to attract private sector investment. As I conclude, Your Excellencies, this summit is expected to serve as a launchpad for bold and transformative decisions that will foster stronger collaboration among African governments, investors, and industrialists to mobilize the capital required to develop the infrastructure that will drive Africa's industrialization and long-term prosperity. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, and allow me at this stage to invite the Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, who will then invite His Excellency the President.
Your Excellency, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Defense Forces, Your Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, ministers and government leaders from across the continent, Madame Lerato Mataboge, AU Commissioner for Infrastructure, Samaila Zubairu, President and CEO of AFC, Aliko Dangote, Chairman and CEO of the Dangote Group, business executives and global partners, leaders of our development financial institutions, ladies and gentlemen. In Africa, the Africa We Build Summit is a profound opportunity to turn potential into action by forging partnerships, unlocking finance, and building continental synergy. Kenya is honored to partner with the Africa Finance Corporation and the African Union Commission to host this inaugural summit, shifting from aspiration and dialogue to execution with clear outputs and implementation pathways. This is a strong start that brings together public and private sector leaders. Today marks a proud moment as we collectively aim to accelerate the mobilization of domestic and international capital towards infrastructure systems that enable large-scale industrialization. Notably, treating infrastructure as a standalone asset delivers little or no impact. Moving priority infrastructure from inception to tangible outcomes across Africa requires an integrated approach, linking roads, railways, ports, power, and digital networks to industrial parks and micro, small, and medium enterprises. This summit is timely for two key reasons. First, it coincides with a growing momentum in realization of the Agenda 2063, particularly the advancement of flagship programs like this Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Second, it takes place amid geopolitical disruptions to global and regional trade. Together, these factors underscore the urgent need for homegrown and proactive resource mobilization to finance Africa's development agenda. This scale therefore calls for a candid examination of the policy environment and strengthening of development finance institutions. It calls for harmonizing border trade measures and taking a collective view of development. Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk of a candid review, I can attest or speak without blinking that in this room today, we have two of the most candid speakers and leaders from our continent joining us so that they can invigorate this momentum. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the first of these leaders in the room, His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, to deliver his keynote address.
Thank you very much. Let's take our seats. And thank you very much, PCS. Your Excellency, our elder in the region, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, the President of the Republic of Uganda, Mr. Samaila Subairu, our good friend, President and CEO of the Africa Finance Corporation, Ministers present, CEOs, distinguished participants, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome. I take this opportunity on behalf of the people and government of Kenya to welcome you all to Nairobi for this most consequential gathering that goes to the heart of our continent's future. The Africa Infrastructure Summit convened by the Africa Finance Corporation is a launchpad for what we want to see into the future as Africans. I also extend a very special welcome to the Africa Finance Corporation as it makes Nairobi its second home. Welcome to Nairobi. Kenya is immensely honored to host the AFC's first office outside its headquarters in Lagos. The theme of this conference, to my mind, is the most critical and vital conversation on our development as African nations and also as a continent. We meet against the backdrop of global economic shocks and disruptions arising from the war in the Gulf, from the war in Ukraine a few years to the war in the Gulf in a few weeks, Africa today produces approximately 10 million barrels of oil per day, which is about 10% of global output. Yet, paradoxically, we remain net importers of petroleum products to the tune of 120 million metric tons annually at a cost of about $90 billion. At an average export price of $75 per barrel, Africa's crude production is valued at roughly $270 billion each year. However, it is this same production, if this same production were refined domestically and exported as finished products at an average price of US dollars 800 per ton, it would generate over $500 billion. This represents foregone income of about $230 billion, which is nearly 7.5% of our GDP from just one resource. This does not even account for the additional gains from downstream industries such as plastics and fertilizers, which we currently import and which we could add another 2 to 3% of our GDP. Excellencies, what point am I trying to make? Africa's place in global trade is defined by a structural imbalance that requires our urgent attention. According to the UN Trade and Development, the continent continues to export predominantly raw materials, minerals, fuels, and agricultural commodities, while importing the very products manufactured from those same resources. In many of our economies, over 60% of exports remain commodity-based, while we import nearly 3 times more manufactured goods than we export. It should not surprise us, therefore, that manufacturing has stagnated at about 10% of GDP for the last 2 decades. As long as this pattern persists, our growth will remain constrained, our economies will remain vulnerable, and our full potential will be unrealized. The leaders of the 50s and 60 years ago may be excused. Our continent then had a population of only 350 million people, largely rural and with limited purchasing power. Today, with a population of 1.5 billion people and a middle class of between 300 and 350 million people, we have no such excuse. We cannot continue to export raw materials and importing finished products made from them. The conversation we will have over the next 2 days must therefore be truly definitive on the way forward in terms of manufacturing and value addition. In this room, we have political leaders, we have industrialists, captains of industry, financiers, everyone required to move this agenda from aspiration to implementation. That is why I propose 3 key action points. First, we must strengthen our political resolve to deepen regional integration. Our countries possesses complementary endowments, including natural resources in one country, energy resources in another country, and an optimal location for industrial processing in the next country. This must be connected through infrastructure, roads, rail, ports, and electricity grids, so that raw materials and intermediate goods can move freely across borders. Equally important, the benefits of such integration must be shared equitably, ensuring that national boundaries do not impede the full realization of a common market with the free movement of goods, capital, and people. Second, we must establish regional platforms for strategic industries. It is worth recalling that the European Union began as the European Gold and Steel Community in 1951. Our East African community is richly endowed with renewable energy, the full spectrum of minerals driving the global energy transition, including copper, cobalt, nickel, manganese, graphite, lithium, and rare earth elements in Kenya, in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Burundi, in Rwanda, in DRC. We're all members of one community. I remember last evening talking to the president of Burundi on the possibilities that exist with the rich resources that exist in Burundi. I remember discussing with President Samia Suluhu this week. I put a phone call to President Museveni last week on this whole setup. And I want to thank you, Mzee, for finding time to be here. So that we can demonstrate leadership at the highest level to move this process forward. We must now move deliberately to pool these resources and position ourselves competitively in the global green manufacturing arena. However, we cannot achieve competitiveness without affordable energy, making large-scale investment in renewable energy an urgent priority, and ensuring that the resources that we have in our region, including the oil we have in Uganda, the little oil we have in Kenya, we must find the mechanism to leverage on these resources and drive our industrialization. Third, we must harness African capital. As the saying goes, he who pays the piper calls the tune. Industrialists here know the meaning of that phrase better than all of us. Our ambitions will remain unrealized if we continue to depend on external capital whose primary interest is securing raw materials for their own industries. We must say that with clarity. We must therefore strengthen our regional development finance institutions, including the Africa Finance Corporation. And I want to inform the Africa Finance Corporation fraternity that as you set up office in Nairobi, the Kenya government is going to enhance its equity by $25 million. As a demonstration of the confidence we have in African financial institutions. I know the president of Afrexim Bank is here with us. When I came into office, we enhanced our equity in Afrexim Bank by $40 million. I know my friend Tadesse is here. We have already discussed how Kenya, being among the highest shareholders of TDB Bank, how we are going to enhance our equity and shareholding in Trade and Development Bank. And we are doing it intentionally and deliberately because we know that they understand us better than anybody else. We do not have to explain ourselves in windy statements and languages. They understand us. They understand where we are. And they know us better than anybody else would. And I want to assure you that we will continue as leaders in this continent to build our own African financial institutions, give them the capacity. And I know we haven't done enough. You can count on us, we will do more. Until we develop the muscle for us to be able to drive our own industrialization and our own development. I say so with benefit of experience. And I will say this, why we must believe in ourselves. I want to say this with clarity. We must. If we are to make progress, it begins with us believing in ourselves. And this is a message I have been having a conversation with the people of Kenya. We must believe in ourselves. When I came into office, I will give you two examples, if you can indulge me. When I came into office, we had a serious fuel crisis in the country. There were queues in our petrol stations. The first lot of people to come to see me, even before I left my former office, were oil marketers. And they told me, Mr. President-elect, we are facing a stock out. We do not have dollars. We have a crisis. And it became my first assignment, maybe baptism by fire, on my first day in office. And we figured out with my team, how do we deal with this? And I remember reaching out to friends who, for this meeting I will not mention, good friends of mine who were running multinational banks and telling them, oh, we need to do this. Little did I know that many of them were already figuring out how they are going to make money when the dollar went to 200 shillings, Kenya shillings to a dollar. They're already thinking how to make money from foreign exchange. I mean, I'm looking at how do we solve a Kenyan problem. It is only one bank, one Kenyan bank, Kenya Commercial Bank, that was willing to issue letters of credit and stand with us at that very critical moment. Do you know what happened? We not only solved that problem in a very permanent way. Today we have a G2G framework that many other countries have come to learn from us. Malawi have been here to learn from us. Burundi have been here to learn from us how we did it. So we solved the problem. But you know what? Kenya Commercial Bank made tons of money in the process. Their share price went from 17 shillings to now 74 shillings. If there was a case for believing in ourselves, Kenya Commercial Bank, being a Kenyan bank, believed in us. We believed in them. The outcome is a win-win. We not only solved our problem, but we built our bank even more. That's one example. Example number two. When I made a proposition to the people of Kenya on a matter that has been with us for a long time, on how do we deal with the challenge of housing. And it's a conversation we've had for long as Kenyans, possibly 25, 30 years of conversation. And I did make a proposition to the people of Kenya that it was necessary for us to do this using our own resources, mobilizing domestic capital for us to be able to undertake our housing program. There was a big debate, but today we have done what we couldn't do with money borrowed from this place and that place, talking to this guy and the other guy and one bank and another one. Using our own domestic resources, today we are building, concluding some of them, 240,000 housing units with a pipeline of 700,000 housing units. We are building hostels for 180,000 students in our universities and Tibet, and we are building 600 modern markets around Kenya with our own resources. Using a housing fund derived from a housing levy, we have signed contracts for $4 billion. $4 billion. Not a single shilling borrowed from anybody. Domestic resources built by Kenyans, raised from Kenya. Believing in ourselves. I make this case firmly that the challenges we face, the aspirations we have for the future, we have the solutions within us. And that's why I'm very happy that we have in our midst not just Africa Finance Corporation, we have the leadership of Afrexim Bank, we have the leadership of Shelter Afrique, we have the leadership of ADB, we have the leadership of Trade and Development Bank. These are institutions that we must mark for the future, and we must invest in them and work with them. Look, Nigeria has been a producer of oil for all the years that we know. Yet, when you went to Nigeria, there were queues of people looking for fuel in petrol stations for a long time. Until one African stepped forward and built a refinery. Aliko Dangote here. The solution wasn't in Europe. It wasn't in Asia. The solution was in Nigeria. For a problem that disturbed Nigeria for years. I dare say, ladies and gentlemen, we have in this room, we have the political leadership, we have the industrialists, we have the financiers to transform our continent, and we must waste no time looking any further. In Kenya, we have established a national infrastructure fund and are in the process of creating a sovereign wealth fund, following in the footsteps of some of our peers on the continent, including, I know, what has been done in Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, and in many other places. Through these instruments, we aim to mobilize public and private, as well as domestic and foreign capital, to fund major priority projects in the tune of $40 billion over the next decade. When you heard my minister here speak, he said, we already have mobilized $3 billion. Just in a short span. And we are looking at the people in this room, how we are going to work together to leverage that money so that we can drive the issues we are discussing here. Infrastructure, transport, logistics, infrastructure. Because Kenya's infrastructure ambition are bold. We seek to expand our road network by over 28,000 kilometers, more than double what we have today over the next 7 years. We also aim to generate an additional 10,000 megawatts, nearly 3 times our current installed capacity. And that is to support modern technology, power industrialization, and sustain economic expansion. At the same time, we are strengthening our export-led agricultural transformation and food security through large-scale irrigation anchored on the construction of at least 50 mega dams to bring an additional 2.5 million acres of land under productive use. Listening to my friend, the CEO of AFC, he did mention very clearly that we have some of the largest agricultural lands in our continent. How do we leverage on those? Why is Africa still a hungry continent? Why is Africa still defined by hunger and imports from all manner of places when we can do it right here? These are not merely national priorities. They are integral to the broader continental agenda of industrial transformation through manufacturing and value addition. For far too long, the economic destiny of our continent has been shaped by others. While historical injustices from colonialism to inequities in the global economic order are real, we must also acknowledge that other regions have faced similar challenges, but they have risen above them. We're not the only ones that have faced these challenges. We are constrained, however, only by the extent that we accept the status quo through acquiescence, complacency, and limited ambition. Too often, as a continent, we have settled for what is rather than what could be. For far too long, we have accepted the average, the ordinary. That must change, good people. We must raise the scale of our ambition and refuse to be defined by what is merely functional. The time has come for Africa to take full control of its destiny. Many of the nations we admire today, from Singapore to South Korea and even Japan, once stood where we stand today, constrained and uncertain of their place in the world. But they made choices that made the difference. Through disciplined leadership, bold policy, and unrelenting commitment to progress, they rewrote their future. And they did not do so over centuries. They did so within a single generation. In just 3 to 4 decades, they moved from fragility to strength, from limitation to global competitiveness. That is the lesson before us, good people. Transformation is neither accidental nor a miracle. It is deliberate. It is intentional. And it is entirely within reach if we have the resolve to pursue it, to reach higher, and to reject the average. This is our assignment as the current generation of Africans, leaders, business people, entrepreneurs. This is our assignment. And this is the job that we must do without equivocation, without wavering, and without hesitation. It is now, ladies and gentlemen, or never. We must get it right. And I'm very happy that we are meeting at a time like this, when it is so obvious to us that we are paying very high prices because of a war in the middle of nowhere, which we have no control over, when we could as well have our own resources here. I want to thank President Museveni for refusing to accept easy choices. He had a choice. He had a choice to allow the oil in Uganda to go the way others would have wanted. But I remember having a conversation with President Museveni, and allow me, Mzee, to say this. When I visited him once, and I asked him, Mzee, what's going to happen about the oil reserves that you have, because it's taken time. And I remember Mzee telling me, look, young man, then I wasn't even president. He told me, you see, some of these people you see here, if we give them a chance, they will sell this oil at a throwaway price and go and buy perfume. You know, those are his words, and they have never left my mind. You know, a case of people making shortcuts, easy decisions, you know, and in the process, sabotaging the destiny of a nation and a region. I am happy that we will be discussing how we are going to use our resources, whether it is the oil we have in our region or the minerals we have in our region, not to export to others, but to industrialize our own region, our countries. When the other day we divested from Kenya Pipeline because we wanted to unlock the value of Kenya Pipeline and use it for the transformation of the country, President Museveni called me and said, I want to buy 50% of Kenya Pipeline. And he told me, I don't care the price. You know, that's how serious he was. When some other pessimists in Kenya were saying, oh, you know, the price is very high, I don't know. You know, President Museveni could see beyond the price. He could see the opportunity of transforming our nation, our region together. Mzee, I want to assure you that the same way you invested in Kenya Pipeline, Kenya is going to invest in your refinery and in the future of our resources together. And hopefully we can bring all the other countries in our region to see the value, not in the short-term benefit you get from something cheap from somewhere else, but in the benefit of building something for the future that will not only earn you money today, but earn you opportunities tomorrow. I run the risk of monopolizing this meeting, and it is not my intention to do so, and I don't want to spoil things for AFC. But allow me, ladies and gentlemen, now to take this opportunity to invite our elder, President Museveni, to come and share with us his wisdom. Mzee, karibu.
Hello, hello. You can hear me? Very good. His Excellency President Ruto, the leaders of the AFC, all the other distinguished persons who are here, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad you have allowed me to speak when I'm seated here, because in doing my push-ups, I strained my back, and I really want to talk to you comfortably, not in a hurry. I want to thank His Excellency President Ruto for organizing this conference, and the AFC for organizing it under the patronage of President Ruto. We have got a minister in Uganda, is called Otafuire. The Bantu ways of naming people, you gave a name which is actually a sentence. So Otafuire means that if you don't die, you will see good things in the end. Therefore, by not dying and having been involved in public affairs for the last 65 years, since 1960, I'm now going to beginning to see some waking up. When the manager from AFC was speaking, I said, this man is speaking my language now. And he's a bureaucrat. But he's speaking a language of revolution. This has been our problem. The discrepancy between revolution and betrayal, really, because Africa has been betrayed in the last 70 years. Sudan was the first to get independence in 1955. It is now 70 years since we started getting independence. But you look at the GDP of Africa. The GDP of Africa is now 3.6 trillion. All of us, imagine, the whole of Africa. Egypt, South Africa, Algeria, all of us. 3.6 trillion. And we are 1.5 billion people now. And our land area is umushandete kahwaya umusho are mugambire. I'm speaking in Kikuyu, you will not understand. So, the land area of Africa is 4 times the size of the United States. And our population is now 5 times the population of the United States of America. But our GDP is 3.6 trillion, and GDP of the USA is 32 trillion. So, all of us together, in terms of wealth, are only 10% of the wealth of the United States. This is a big shame. Why should this be the case? There has been some talk that there was no other way in the past. I don't believe that. If you look at China, you people, you can go and get the figures. China was very, very poor, very underdeveloped when the communists took over. But they were able, because of discipline and clarity, were able to save and start investing in their economy, even when they were still very poor. So it is ideological. It's not just money. It's not money. This is more than money. We had a conference here about 10 years ago, here in Nairobi here, with the Prime Minister of Japan, who died, the one who died. We had a conference here. And in that conference, I made this written speech, which they would distribute to the delegations. And in this speech, I pointed out that, and I'm glad that the speaker is here, His Excellency President Ruto, the person from the IFC, our commissioner, the man from the islands, the minister, who originally came from Uganda long ago. They all talked about it. We should not look at these issues in isolated ways. This was the problem in the 1960s and even 70s. They would pick one item, rural development. Then they talk about that, talk about that, talk about that. Then after some time they say, no. Women empowerment. Then women empowerment. Then education. Then just like that. But in that speech, I pointed out that in my view, there are 10 strategic bottlenecks. And I can repeat them for you here. Number one, is ideological orientation. Because we are talking of interregional infrastructure. But how will you have interregional infrastructure if there are wars going on? And these wars are based on ideological bankruptcy. People believe in sectarianism. They believe in the politics of identity, of tribe, of religion. The wars which are going on in the Middle East, what is their ideological base? What are they fighting for? We know all those people. The Iranians, the Israelis, the Americans, we know all of them. We have good relations with them. But you can see that the mistakes which they have in their thinking is the one which causes all this suffering. Mistakes, ideological. What is crucial? Is it because I am a Munyankore? You see, that's why I was speaking in Kikuyu. I wanted somebody to bring me my coffee. So, in my view, I welcome these very good technical, professional ideas about infrastructure. But I think if we only focus on infrastructure alone, we may not go far. Because there are wars. There are wars in Congo, there are wars in South Sudan, there are wars in all these different places, Somalia. So how will you have infrastructure? if people are fighting for wrong reasons. Therefore, strategic obstacle number one in this booklet, which I will give you, was ideological disorientation. Why do you believe in tribalism and religious sectarianism? I am a cattle keeper. I'm like these Maasais who are dancing here. I produce milk. I produce beef. I produce bananas. But people in my tribe don't buy from me. Why? Because they also have the same products. I have milk, they have milk. They don't buy from me, I don't buy from them. I have beef, they have beef. So who buys from me? The people of Kampala, many of whom are not my tribe. The people of East Africa. So my prosperity is supported more by Uganda as a country and East Africa and Africa than by my own small group. If therefore you have somebody killing people just because of religion or tribes, how will you have the corridors we are talking about? That is strategic obstacle number one, which we pointed out here when we met here with Mr. Abe, the Prime Minister of Japan. Because of number one, because of ideological fragmentation, then you end up with weak states. No army. Why is there insecurity in Africa? Some of these countries have no armies. Why don't they have an army? Because they cannot build one. Why? Because or ideology. You want to have a highly paid army when you don't have money. How will you have an army? In Uganda, we fought for no money for 17 years. From 1971 to 1987, I was fighting for no pay, for patriotism. So how would you have a paid army when you don't have money? You don't have the state to pay. So therefore, because of that, and then when you recruit soldiers, instead of joining the national army, they join the clan armies like in Somalia. Now, if you don't have army, you don't have police, how would you have peace? So, number one, ideological disorientation leads to number two, weak states. Then you come to the underdevelopment of the human resource, education. There, many Africans have gone to school now. Many of them we have got more educated people than before. But they need these other factors. But in some cases, it is also a problem. Then number four is what we are talking about here. We talked about this here 10 years ago. What we are talking about now, the infrastructure, is number four here in this booklet. It is very true that if you don't have infrastructure, how will you have industrialization? How will you have modernization? Now, on infrastructure, we are moving very well now. From the comments of His Excellency President Ruto, from the comments of the AFC, we are all moving in the right direction. The only clarification I want to make is that there are core cost pushers. If you want your economy to succeed, you must identify the core cost pushers, which push costs in production. One of them is transport. Transport, especially the railway and the water transport. So if you build the railway, you must build it with either government money, who are not looking for high profits and quickly, or with patient capital, patient private capital. Because if you have got very high cost of transport of the railway, how will you compete? How will you compete? How will the companies make money? The other cost pusher is electricity. In Uganda, my people behind my back, they made a mistake and they went with a group called what? I don't know what they called them. And they built a dam, one of the dams on the Nile, using private money. When it came to the price of the electricity, production was 16 cents per kilowatt hour. How can you make money? How can that electricity help the economy? Well, it almost caused a civil war because they didn't tell me, they went behind my back. But the dams were built with government money. We are able to produce electricity at 4.8 cents, American cents per kilowatt hour. Then the old dams, the ones we have already paid for, the cost is 1.2 cents, American cents. So there, you must be very careful. It must either be government money or patient capital, not people who are looking for quick money. Then the next, it is the railway and electricity and water transport. And then the cost of money in the banks. That's why in Uganda, I had to keep the Uganda Development Bank. I privatized the Uganda Commercial Bank because they persuaded me that they confused me. They said, if you privatize, private capital is efficient, they will do what? I said, okay, but you know, I am a bushman. So I go cautiously. So I said, okay, you take the Uganda Commercial Bank. They privatized it. The interest rate is now 25%. How can somebody, that's how you get what His Excellency was talking about, the perfume importers. They are the ones who make money from 25% interest loans. A manufacturer cannot make profit with 25%, or a farmer. So, rail transport, electricity, cost of money for manufacturing and agriculture. I would want you to look at it. The cost of labor is still not high. Cost of labor, the salaries are not still high. Those are not a problem. Now it comes down to the pipeline. I would not have bothered His Excellency Ruto so much for fuel, especially people who are driving on the road. If the fuel is expensive, don't travel, stay at home. Where are you going? I'm not really worried about you. What I was worried about was jet fuel. Because jet fuel is not only just for travel, it is for tourism. If the cost of the jet fuel is very expensive, the tourists will not come. It is for export, because the aircrafts also export. So that's why I had to disturb His Excellency Ruto that the governments need to keep a voice in the pipeline. The governments of Kenya, government of Uganda must keep a voice in the pipeline, mainly because for the jet fuel. People are going for nightclubs, I don't care so much about them. If you don't have the money, stay at home. Where are you going? So therefore, with the infrastructure, but for instance, for the roads, once we have got enough infrastructure of the railway and the water, because there's also water transport, Lake Victoria, the River Nile, Lake Albert. Once we have those, the railway, electricity, for the roads, we can actually have toll roads. Yeah. That's what I'm telling our American friends. Come and make money on the toll roads. I will not welcome you in the railway if you are greedy for profits. But for the toll roads, you build the road and charge it. Those who can pay, those who can use the smaller national roads. So that's what I would say on the infrastructure. Now, the other bottleneck, because of these bottlenecks, then you end up what our leaders were talking about here. Export of raw materials, unprocessed. When you export unprocessed, when you export cotton unprocessed as lint, you get $1.2 per kilogram. That 1 kilogram, if you make cloth out of it and garments, you will get $15. The same kilogram for which you got 1.2. If you weave, you spin, weave, and get garments out of it, you'll get $15. Coffee. A kilo of coffee unprocessed is $2.5. The same kilo processed will go for $25 or even $40. So the Africans have been the mega donors. I don't know why they are never called in conferences for donors in Paris, because they are the mega donors. In every kilogram of coffee, you are donating $40. And they don't know. You find the Africans there putting on ties, moving around. They are not bothered. So therefore, without electricity, without the railway, you cannot industrialize. And you go on with the raw materials. That's why you have got this stunted economy. The other day, I was with the delegation of military people from Tanzania. They gave me a word of stunted in Swahili. Does somebody have that word in Swahili kabisa? Stunted growth. Mtoto ambaye hakue. They told me, but I forgot. Last night I was with the delegation from Tanzania. I know it in my language, kuningama. But get it in Swahili. So the African economy is stunted. Stunted because of these mistakes, because of these hemorrhages. Then, number 6, fragmented market. If you produce, who buys? I've told you that my tribe cannot help me with, I am a capitalist also. I sell my milk. But in Uganda, it is bought by the Ugandans in Kampala. Not in my tribal area so much. Then East Africa. That's why I've been begging His Excellency Ruto, my young sister Samia, please ruhusu maziwa yangu yaje huko bila vizuizi. Now, if you don't have a market, how will you attract capital? And the ones who invest in your country, how will they succeed? China opened in 1978. I'm comfortable, I'm all right. China, I have the figures here by that time. China opened in 1978, opened the economy. Our African economies were open all the time, all that time. But by the time I made this speech here, 10 years ago when we were with the Prime Minister of Japan here, by that time China had attracted $2.6 trillion, while Africa had attracted only 0.65 trillion. Why? One of the magnets is the big Chinese market inside China. One of the big magnets of attracting. So, to go on with this fragmented economy is a very big mistake. And that's why I'm very happy with His Excellency Ruto denouncing the tariff barriers that stop trade among our countries. Then the other bottleneck here, underdeveloped services, tourism, banking, professional services, and so on. Underdeveloped agriculture, number 8, bottleneck number 8. Uganda has got a little bit of agriculture. We never import food. So when I saw people crying that there was a war in Ukraine, is the war in Uganda here? It's in Ukraine. Why are you crying? Or that we shall have no food to eat. Not in Uganda, we always eat. We have enough food. We have got so much food that we don't know where to put it. Market is our problem. But in other parts of Africa, you get this problem of no food. Amazing. And the food they buy from outside is very dangerous. Bad food, with hormones and so on. Now, in the 1960s, we had made some mistakes also. We, the African people. You must have heard that in Uganda, Idi Amin grabbed private capital, the property of the Indians. And in other countries, they had a practice of what they were calling nationalization, kutaifisha. That one also was a mistake, strategic mistake. But I'm glad that when we came into government, because I was from the revolutionary side, I had enough credentials to say no, give back all the property of the Indians. Let them get their properties back. Because my people, some of them are here, they were saying, no, we must keep the properties of Indians. I said, but if you don't give back the Indians their properties, who will trust you that in future, if you invest in your country, you will not also grab his property, that like you grabbed the one of the Indians. So I persuaded them, we gave back all the property of the Indians, miserable properties, just 4,000 of them. Not much. Kisirani too. Now, around Kampala alone, in the whole of Uganda, we had only 4,000 Asian properties. 4,000 in the whole of Uganda. But now around Kampala alone, we have got 2 million properties of the Ugandans, plus also our Indians who came back. So that was also another mistake. You, the people, should remember that issue of confiscating properties of private sector was one of the mistakes that delayed us. Now, finally, of course, the final bottleneck was lack of democracy. Because that was also another problem. Because if you don't have, I see some people trying to say democracy is a luxury. No. Democracy forces you to be accountable, to go to the people and win their support. Recently we had elections, and where my people listened to my advice, we performed very well. When they implement what we like, getting rid of poverty in the whole country. How can you preserve poverty in the whole country? It's not a national park that you are preserving. So now, therefore, I want to conclude by saying that we have the money here. Yes, we are getting more money. Now our speaker from AFC gave a very good example. The pension funds. What are they being used for? NSSF in Uganda has got a lot of money, but they just invest in treasury bills. The government borrows from national fund and eats the money. They borrow for eating. So, our expert has really challenged you people. You heard him. That the NSSF money should be not for eating. Because if you treasury bills, they are borrowing to pay debts, to pay salaries, to pay what? They are not borrowing for I call infrastructure omsomyo in our language. Omsomyo means the bone marrow. You know, the English don't have enough words. They couldn't describe that part of the body. The bone marrow, they call it bone marrow. But in our language, we call it omsomyo or omshokoro in one of the other languages. So, the omshokoro of the economy is the railway, transport, electricity, the cost of, plus of course peace and so on. So if the NSSF money is used for eating, not to build part of the bone marrow, because the English don't have enough words, it's a very big mistake. But also, the government, our countries can deliberately save. We have been funding, we set up a science innovation fund where I have been funding government innovations. We have built an electric vehicle called Chira motor vehicle, and its sister vehicles, the bus and the other smaller vehicles. Using the government money, government capital. So now we are getting demands, getting orders for that electric vehicle. We are to build our own vehicles because I had begged the Japanese to come and assemble in Uganda. They refused. So I said, okay, bye-bye. Now, when I started making my vehicles, some of the Japanese came. So want to assemble. I said, no, too late. I will not allow any assembling in Uganda. You must manufacture, not assemble. The vaccines, we have been funding them ourselves. I'm going to launch an anti-tick vaccine the day after, a few days to come. So we have the capital. It's not enough, but we have it. If we constrain consumption, we can get the capital. So therefore, I'm very happy with the initiative of His Excellency Ruto. Like on the issue of the refinery, what he told you, in Uganda, I have banned the export of unprocessed minerals. All of them, I have banned them. They have been praying for me to die or something like that, but no export of tin, no export of copper. They are all there in the ground. But slowly we are getting investors. Iron ore. Can you imagine? Some Indian guy from India, the New Delhi, had come to made a deal with my people to sell our iron ore at $47 per ton. The iron ore of Uganda is the best in the whole world. It is about 70% pure. So, when you sell iron ore, somebody goes and makes it into steel. He earns, at one time he would earn $900. And you export all the jobs. But I stopped them. And I'm glad that some of the investors from Kenya, encouraged by His Excellency Ruto, are now investing in the steel industry in Uganda. Now, on the issue of petroleum, we found it long ago, 2005. But up to now, it's now about to come out of the ground. What was the reason? Disagreeing with the oil companies, Total. They were telling my people who would tell me, refineries don't make money. They don't make money. How about the ones who build them? Why do they build them? Then when I checked, the refinery in Uganda actually is very, very profitable. Do we have somebody from that sector? From energy? Do we have somebody here? Minister, do you remember the internal rate of return? 14. You'll confirm. Or you're going to confirm. The internal rate of return is very high of the refinery in Uganda. So, but because I'm also tactical, because the Total were insisting that they should take all the oil. Why do you take the oil? They could use as are here. Why do you take it? So, no, there's no money in the refinery. I said, no, you are lying. Now, eventually we agreed that we build a small refinery of 60,000 barrels per day. What do you call this? You build, then you add on. There's a way they say it in English. You build one unit, then you add on. Add on another 60,000, and that my refinery would have first score on the oil, and then the balance you can export through Tanzania. Fine. Now recently, and then that ECOP, it's now called ECOP, East African Pipeline. Later on, we could see that people of Congo could use it if they want, because there's some oil there on the other side. People in South Sudan can use it, because they have got oil there. Now, this oil of the Carabat is one of the 4-5 provinces We have got 4 other provinces of oil. This is just one of them. So therefore, the 13%, the internal rate of return is 1.13. Okay. And what is the internal rate of return of others in the world? Find out. So therefore, when His Excellency Ruto recently sent me a message, I supported it, that the surplus oil, which we had given to Total to take through Tanga to I don't know where, be our contribution to the refinery in Tanga, number 1. Then later on, we can add the petroleum from the other Congo, from South Sudan, and also these other because the one of Uganda, where we have the oil now, is only 40% of the Albert area. There is another 60% which we have not which is not yet fully explored. So there's more oil in Uganda, both within Albert and in the other provinces. So therefore, I support this idea of the Tanga refinery. We shall maintain our small refinery because we have already gone ahead. We are very far. We can't stop. The question is, how do you those refineries, if you don't want to create kwa Kiswahili tunasema wivu, jealous. Tunasema wivu, wivu. If you don't want wivu, it's better that if the countries have ownership together, like in because that's what we are doing in the past. We are calling it East African Common Services. We are owning the ports together, East African harbors, East African Railway, East African Airways, East African Development Bank. It was all East African. If it is all ours, then it is ours. Then it is not either me or you. Hakuna kushindana. You are all together. So with these few words, you should be careful. Don't invite old men for. Don't give audience to old men, because you do so at your own risk. With these few words, it is now my pleasure to participate in the meeting.
A round of applause again for Mzee. Thank you very much. Please, let's take our seats. You agree with me that please, let's take our seats. You agree with me that we have benefited from a wealth of wisdom from Mzee, President Museveni, and we have been listening to you very carefully, Mzee, very carefully, and you have made the work of this summit that much more easy for us to take it forward. I take note of what you have said about the need for us to save. It is one of the decisions that I've had to make in Kenya to change the contribution model for our savings. You have also made a very profound statement, and I hope those of us in Kenya were listening to Mzee. He has said money from our social security savings must not only be used for matters consumption and paying debt by investing in treasury bills. it should also be invested much more meaningfully in infrastructure development. That is what progressive countries do. I know there's been a debate in Kenya as to whether resources from our pension funds should be used in the development of the railway, the roads, and other infrastructure. The wisdom of Mzee tells us that is the right thing to do. And that is conventional wisdom worldwide. And it is the statement that was said by my good friend, the CEO of Africa Finance Corporation, linking our pension funds to infrastructure development. So with those many remarks, I think it's a good point for us to say now that the Africa Infrastructure Summit is formally open and we can progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency, Dr. William Samoei Ruto. I'll request that we kindly take our seats. We'll shortly be transitioning to a presidential panel discussion. And for us to transition to that, we'll now have the signing of the host country agreement. And I request that we bring in the table and those instruments that are going to be used for signing. This is a signing of the host country agreement between Kenya and the Africa Finance Corporation. It is basically to establish the regional offices of the Africa Finance Corporation in Nairobi, Kenya, as has already been mentioned. So at this point, allow me to invite the signatories, starting with His Excellency Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, who is the Prime Cabinet Secretary, to kindly take your seat at the signing table. Also followed in tow by Samia D. Zaibaru, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Africa Finance Corporation. The host country agreement is between the government of the Republic of Kenya and the Africa Finance Corporation. So I'll also request that the legal team that is assisting with the signing to kindly present the documents as we now witness the signing of the host country agreement between Kenya and Africa Finance Corporation. Again, the objective of this particular signing is to establish the regional offices of the Africa Finance Corporation in Nairobi, Kenya. As mentioned earlier, Kenya is definitely the hub of many activities in the region. Africa Finance Corporation, Kenya now also being established, and after the signing, we'll request for a photo op before we transition to the next part of this particular opening ceremony, which will be the presidential panel discussion, in which I will invite Jennifer, who's going to be the moderator of that particular session, Jennifer from Bloomberg, but I will do that as soon as we're done with the signing of the agreement. Again, perhaps just to capture that for the sake of those who might be doing the communication for this particular session, this agreement, the objective is to establish a regional office of the Africa Finance Corporation in Nairobi. And it is the host country being Kenya. And this particular agreement is between the government of the Republic of Kenya and the Africa Finance Corporation. Now that the signing is done, we'll request that the signatories will stand for a photo op as they hold their document. Kindly let them hold their document for that photo op with the crowns facing the photographers. Wonderful. Why don't you give a round of applause? Thank you. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Thank you very much. You may exit, and I'll request that we now prepare the stage for the panel discussion. And this particular panel discussion, Africa's industrial revolution needs 3 levels of success to succeed: the right policy, the right environment to attract and retain capital, industrial courage to build and scale, and the development capital and architecture to turn projects into bankable investment assets. I'll request that we now bring in the chairs for the panel discussion as I go through this. Africa's industrial revolution needs 3 levers to succeed: the right policy, environment to attract and retain capital, the industrial courage to build at scale, and the development capital architecture to turn projects into bankable investment assets. This conversation unpacks what each looks like in practice and what happens when all these 3 pull in tandem. This definitely being revolutionary, and as mentioned earlier, it is a paradigm shift. It is a moment where we change how we look at things as Africa. So as we get ready, allow me to now invite Jennifer Zabasanja, who's an anchor at Bloomberg, who's going to be moderating this session. So I'll invite her to kindly take her seat. Then after that, scene set for what we are about to have. And as we wait for the principals, I'll request that we have some background music playing as we get ourselves ready. Jennifer, if you're around, kindly, you may come and take your seat as we prepare to invite the other panelists, which includes the 2 heads of state that we have present. Why don't we put our hands together as we welcome Jennifer? So allow me to invite the panelists. And at this point, Samaila Zubairu, kindly, if you may come on stage. Let's give him a clap as he's approaching. Also, allow me to invite on stage Alhaji Aliko Dangote, Chairman and CEO of Dangote Group. And we shall now just take a short minute as we wait for His Excellency Yoweri Museveni, who will also join in the panel together with His Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto. So we'll just take, let's just have some background music as we wait on that. So allow me to invite Jennifer to just set the scene as we transition. Welcome, Jennifer.
Okay, we found one that works. Good afternoon, everyone. As Mike was pointing out, my name is Jennifer Zabasaja, and I am an anchor and a correspondent for Bloomberg Television based in Johannesburg. And I'm very pleased and honored to be a part of this panel session today with Aliko Dangote, also Samaila Zubairu, and our two heads of state who will join us. As we've been hearing all morning, the discussion is really about a more regional integrated approach to investment and infrastructure. And so we're hoping to, again, as Mike was pointing out, put the levers, the three different levers together that make up the ambition and hopefully accelerate some of the ambition that we have. And we have, of course, one of the best examples of that in Aliko Dangote, of course, with the refinery in Nigeria, and then some, and also the policy portion of it, how we see our leaders potentially helping us to accelerate that, and the AFC, of course, convening this gathering and talking about the financial architecture that is needed to make this happen. So perhaps we get things started while we wait a bit. I wanted to just start here, and maybe I start with the both of you. Aliko, you're so far away. I don't know why. But luckily we have microphones. We've been speaking all morning and hearing from the presidents and the heads of state about some of the challenges that we've seen on the continent and the potential moving forward. What's been interesting is for the past 2 decades, if we take a look at AFC has been 20 years old. Past 2 decades, there's been more than $1 trillion US dollars committed to infrastructure investment on the continent. And yet we're seeing the vulnerabilities of Africa at this point. Of course, from your vantage point, as someone who has this refinery that is revolutionizing the way we talk about industrialization on the continent, where do you think the gaps still are right now?
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here. I must thank AFC and the government of Kenya for arranging this conference, which is the Africa we build. I think, sorry, I have a bit of, I've lost my voice really, so, I hope you can hear me. So when you look at it today, we can do much bigger things, and I think it was President Ruto who said that maybe we should forgive past leaders. But right now we don't have any excuse, because we have, very big financial institutions. We have big entrepreneurs. What actually caused the delay before was that normally when you go to those financial institutions, the interest is not to develop Africa. The interest is to develop themselves. And, today we have big financial institutions that are at least they can listen to the big, entrepreneurs and see how do we develop and build our nation. We have made a lot of mistakes in the past where we've been relying on foreign investors. A foreign investor will not come without the leadership of domestic investor. So a domestic investor must take the risk and start developing your own continent, not for you to wait for foreign investors. Foreign investors will only come when things are looking rosy and good. So, as we speak today, also, when you listen to the speech of President Ruto, he actually summarizes almost everything that we are to discuss today. You have pension funds, 550 billion of pension funds in Africa, and you are funding something totally that is irrelevant. And most of our own people too, when they have money, they take the money abroad. So when they know that we have money, we have what it takes to develop our continent, every day we are saying potential, potential. Potential for what? The potentials are there, of course, but you have to harness the potentials. I mean, we've been having fuel queues in Nigeria for 52 years. Even when the refineries were sold, 3 out of 2. 3 out of 4 were sold to us in 2007. Later on, the same people who are benefiting $10 billion of corruption money went and instigated, and it was reversed a few months later, which we lost a lot of money because we paid banks, we paid advisors, we paid lawyers, we paid everybody, of which, AFC was part of. So today, as we speak, can we be where we want to be? The answer is yes. But we must build it ourselves as Africans, not by foreigners.
Thank you for that. And of course, we will welcome President Museveni and also President Ruto to the stage. We were just speaking about the gaps that still exist despite some of the investment that we've seen on the continent. I've been listening to both of you speak this morning, and it seems like there is more cohesion between both of your countries. I wonder if you speak to an investor and you talk about what the regional collaboration looks like now, what's different now than in the past, what would you say? President Museveni?
I think what is different is that the mistake makers have failed. So people have seen the mistakes. The mistakes have blossomed. They have seen. I think that's why people are beginning to see themselves different. You can see these are. I have been watching this for the last 65 years. I think Mr. Ruto may be, are you 65? 58, you can imagine. 50. So, these young people have come up and they have seen. It would have been better if because like some of the other people, like the Chinese, the people like Lee Kuan Yew, they saw it earlier. But Africa also had a lot of additional problems. Like, for instance, landlocked countries.
Right.
If you are landlocked, even if you see something, if the coastal countries don't see it properly, you can't move. So the mistakes are our biggest teachers, because and the crises. The youth have no jobs. So I think people can now see, can listen more, because there was a law. It was really ideological intoxication. That if you, like for instance here in East Africa, how the East African community broke up in 1977 with Amin. People thought there was another way other than the East African community. But now later on they discovered that no, East African community is the only way, and that's how we came back.
President Ruto, have recent crises potentially accelerated some of this newfound collaboration between your countries?
Yes and no. I think the question you've asked is what is different now? And I think there is realization by all of us that the solution to the challenges and problems we have is not out there. It is right with us. If you listen from what Dangote has said, he has said investors from out there will not invest in our countries unless we take the lead ourselves. Why would somebody else take a risk? How is it their business to build our countries? It's none of their business, and I mean, it's rightfully so. First and foremost, we must realize that it is our responsibility. Others can only come to support us, but we must take the lead ourselves. And it doesn't start with entrepreneurs and industrialists like Aliko here. It starts with leaders like President Museveni and myself. Because the challenge that we have in our continent is a challenge of leadership. That's it. I mean, if the leaders are not willing to lead from the front, if the leaders are not willing to make the decisions, the policy choices that will take our country forward, because some of the policy choices are not necessarily popular. It isn't easy for it is not easy for President Museveni to say, if you are not making this choice, we are not going with you. You know, banning export of minerals is not an easy thing, because there are people who make money out of selling raw materials. So you have to tell them, no, this is not the right thing to do. So some choices have to be made by leaders. So it starts with us as leaders, making the right choices. Not convenient choices, not necessarily popular choices, the right choices. That's number one. Number two, it is to stop what President Museveni was saying, petty jealousy, you know, between us, you know. I'll give you an example. President Museveni decided that he is going to invest in the pipeline in Kenya because he believes that the pipeline in Kenya is not only important for Kenya, but is also important for Uganda. When President Museveni told me, I went to him and I told him, please give us some of your iron ore for our business people here in Kenya. He told me, that is not the policy choice I want to make. I have already said nobody is going to take iron ore from Uganda unprocessed. Then I made the choice that the investors who are in Kenya, I persuaded them to go and invest in the in the plant in Uganda. You know, I was not selfish about it, because what will happen is that the iron ore in Uganda, the steel that is going to come from that iron ore is going to benefit not just Uganda, it's going to benefit Kenya as well. Instead of us importing steel from all over the world, it is cheaper for us to import steel from Uganda.
Right.
And because this is one region. So this, the beginning is the leadership that determine how we move forward. Let me conclude by saying, listening to Aliko Dangote here, it is not just leadership at our level, it's also leadership at the level of our business people. It would have been easier for Aliko Dangote to do trade of oil. You know, I remember speaking to President Olusegun Obasanjo, and he told me he had a meeting with Aliko here, and Aliko told him, if you don't change the policies here, it is easier for me to import oil cheaper, I make more money, sell, than to refine oil, unless you make the right policy decisions. And that is what Aliko is telling us here, that the private sector and us will invest in the refinery. And by the way, we are discussing a refinery in Tanzania.
The two of you.
Yes, we are not discussing a refinery in Kenya or Uganda. We are discussing that we are going to have a joint refinery in Tanga to benefit all of us, because that refinery is going to take on board the oil from DRC, the oil from Kenya, the oil from South Sudan, the oil from Uganda, and we will just need to build a short pipeline from Tanga to Mombasa, and the finished product will use the pipeline that we already jointly own with Uganda. So all our assets become profitable. But you need a longer term view, to see it than just a short term, country by country. And that is why President Museveni was saying fragmentation is also part of our enemy. That is why some people broke up the East African community, because they didn't see the benefit of the bigger market. They were just looking at individual countries. So that is the where we are at the moment. And it is different because we've all learned our lessons. The policymakers, like myself and President Museveni, we can see with clarity where this should go. Industrialists like Dangote here, they too can see. And AFC right here with us, and all these other good bank people, they also appreciate that it is their responsibility to invest in this infrastructure because it makes them money and it grows their bank balance sheets as well.
Thank you, President Ruto. Samaila, I wanted you to jump in because
But Mujuku, you speak Swahili?
Not right now. Samaila, I wanted you to jump in because...
Just hold on. What is also new is that if you look at Uganda, the pool of scientists whom we have now, we didn't have them at independence. We now have people who can do anything. Automobiles, vaccines, electronics. So although we are meandering, making mistakes, but also some capacity was being built. Education, knowledge. We've got a lot of scientists. There's nothing you cannot make. So that is also new. So it is capacity there, but what he's saying, the eyes to see
the future workforce. Samaila, I wanted you to jump in. When you talk to global investors, is this regional cooperation, is that becoming a prerequisite? Because it seems like you've been speaking about this for quite some time, and it's seeming like now that we're getting government on board, this is actually starting to pick up steam and being the case for capital to actually be deployed. What are you hearing in your discussions?
Very good question. I'd like to lean in on 2 points raised. I think the key point is leadership. Leadership is extremely, extremely important to whatever we want to achieve. And I want us to look at leadership not just, from a transaction that we want to do now, but maybe from a long-term perspective. We need to embrace the idea of thinking about the next 15, 20, 30 years when we're thinking about development. So if you saw the report today, on the State of Africa Infrastructure Report, it talked about the consumption over time. It says it's going to grow significantly. And since we know that consumption is going to grow significantly, it only makes sense to look at regional infrastructure, which is what is happening here. Another point I want to make is the need for this same leadership to be applied to capital mobilization. I cannot emphasize that point enough, because Alhaji Aliko mentioned it. I mentioned it as well. And President mentioned it. He said, who pays the piper dictates the tune. Capital has always been one of those enablers for development, and we need to crack that code. And it's not so difficult. It's not so difficult because what we need to do is to look at what we have. Our research shows we have 4.4 trillion, over 600 billion with pension funds, over 400 billion with insurance funds. That's $1 trillion. And these are traditional long-term investors. So what we should be looking at is the regulation that prevents insurance companies from playing in other jurisdictions. The regulations that focus more on short-term treasury bill investments as opposed to long-term productive investments. We need to educate our trustees and gatekeepers on the need to think of the future of the workers whose funds they are managing. It is not enough to say that you're managing funds for pensioners and their children will be unemployed. That doesn't make any sense. We must have that in mind, that we must be managing holistically. So that means we must be deliberate around policy and on what will make policy work. So I come back to credit enhancements. You know, we're just starting this journey. We're starting this journey. We need to understand that the trustees are more focused on safety and liquidity. That's their job. So we need to find a way to make them comfortable to take longer term risks. And I believe that within us in this room, the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, the new architecture for financial, the new African Financial Architecture Development that is being chaired by ADB, within this room or within this group, we can create guarantee programs that will take the initial risk from pension funds. So they're not looking at the project, they're looking at our own risks. And because we are going to develop and prepare these projects, they can be comfortable that we will not put our money in things that don't work. I say this because we need to go beyond this 100 million, 1 billion, 2 billion. We should be looking at 20, 30, 40, 50 billion for development. And for me, that is more important than any conversations that we can have with anybody. Let's focus on our needs for development. We have identified several infrastructure projects that need to be built. We have identified several refineries, fertilizer plants, all of this. They need billions of dollars. And we should be thinking about how can we use this opportunity, create those credit enhancements, create those guarantee programs that allow us to mobilize 20, 30, 40 billion dollars. I'm not interested in conversations. I mean, we have conversations, but I mean, like Elijah Aliko mentioned, they are focused on their own objectives. Yeah. I'm focused on African objectives. I'm focused on the future of the African child. I'm focused on what future are we living. So I'm more interested in what we can do together. I'm more interested in what leadership can get done. And let's work together, make these reforms in the insurance, in the pension sectors to ensure that capital moves around.
So somewhat answered my question. A little bit of, not so much a prerequisite, but just it's a nuanced discussion that you're having with investors now. Aliko, I wanted you to jump in because you have said that you have an ambitious goal for the Dangote Group and want to invest where there's a lack of investment on the African continent. When you look at East Africa, what are the policy commitments that you need? You say you're already in discussion. What is it that you need?
I think what we need, first of all, is consistency in government policies. That's number one. And also the support of the governments here. Because, I mean, if you look at it really, what we lack in Africa is quite a lot. Because we're a continent of imports and we're not really exporting much. We export raw materials. Which means when you export raw materials, you are exporting jobs. And when you import, you are importing poverty. Because you are creating jobs out there, not here in the continent. So I think with the support of the government, there's nothing that is impossible. And some of us were really tired of seeing our continent going out there to be begging for anything. I mean, if you remember at the beginning of the war between Ukraine and Russia, the chairman of African Union, that was President Macky Sall, had to go and be begging for fertilizers. And since that day, I said, okay, fine, by 2028, Africa will be self-sufficient in fertilizer. And we are doing that. We are opening 20 blending plants in areas where they don't have the capacity. Also, we are going to be at 12 million tons of urea. We are going to have massive potash and phosphate from Congo, Brazzaville. And we believe we will satisfy most of the demands of Africa. I mean, you look at it today with population of Africa of 1.4 billion and also rising, right? We don't have raw material for detergent, just to wash this clothes, which we need every day. We don't have. We only have 2 factories, one Egypt, 50 tons, 100 tons in Algeria. So that's why we also launched now 400,000 metric tons of linear alkaline benzene, which is the 100% raw material of detergent. So we have quite a lot of which before we don't have the capacity, but right now with the likes of Afrexim Bank, with the likes of Africa Finance Corporation, with a lot of support from other financial institutions. Following these two, there's nothing we cannot do in Africa. That's why we, as a group, we have now launched between now and 2030, we're investing $40 billion in various fields.
Is part of that the refinery?
Even now, I can give commitment to the two presidents that were here. If they will support the refinery, we'll build the identical one that we have in Nigeria, 650,000 barrels.
So the discussions are still early, though, but the three of you, it seems like you're trying to make this work.
It will work. There's nothing that can stop it. We have done the one in Nigeria, and that's why we are taking the bold move, which we have started already. Piling has started. We are building that one to a scale. 1.4 million barrels a day will give us will be the largest refinery in the world. That's number one. Number two, will have 10% of the entire United States of America's refining capacity. And this is coming with a lot of, petrochemicals. And if you look at it today in Nigeria, if not because we have polypropylene, all the plants, all the businesses would have collapsed because cement is packed in polypropylene, flour, rice, grains, everything. So nothing. And the cost now has shot up between just 45 days from $900 a ton to $3,000. There's no way you can afford it. So that is why we must learn how to build self-sufficiency. Right now, we have big financial institutions that are very hungry for big ticket items. And we are also big in terms of our own vision. Before, there's nothing that, any one of us will sit down and say, no, I want to build something like, when Samaila was heading our finance, long time ago, this was 2003, 2004, 2005, we were even paying 44% interest rate in Nigeria. We had to go to IFC to raise money. Was our first loan abroad was 478 million. And this thing can be done. 478 million. Samaila gave them a calculation that, okay, we need 3 years loan. They said, no, you guys, you don't know what you are talking about. You need 7 years. 2 years moratorium, 5 years payment. We said, okay, we agree because we are desperate for the money. When we took that money, we paid it back before the expiration of the moratorium, which is 18 months. 24 months, but we paid the money back in 18 months. So it is possible. Africans can do it. Let us not be scared. Let them not come and convince us that, no, somebody needs to carry our raw material to go and produce and bring the items here. I must really thank President of Uganda for taking this bold move. Stopping the export, they will be forced, they will come and produce. Why do you want to take the raw material, then you bring it back? We too, we have educated people, we have big financial institutions. It's not like before. Things have changed.
Thank you for that. I'm cognizant of time. We don't have enough time. President Ruto, yes.
I'm happy that my Minister for Minerals is here, Hassan Joho. I hope you have heard the
I see more plans.
We are not exporting anything raw going forward. And the instructions are very clear that our minerals, for the record, sit down, was it? For the record, we had Base Titanium, one of the companies, they were exporting titanium out of Kenya. They exported everything close to the mines, and we got nothing out of it. Very little. you know, and the future generations are going to ask us, there was titanium in Kenya. What happened to it? And we will have no answers for it. And that is why, going forward, we've been very clear as a government that the rare earth that we are now looking at, all the other gold issues and the whole mineral sector, we are not going to export it raw anymore. With clarity. And that is why, as we build the refinery together, this conference is also how are we going to take charge of all the other minerals in our region that are today being exported in raw form. How do we create an ecosystem here that also creates better beneficiation of these minerals by processing it here and driving the industries that use these minerals to come here and work with us, because in any case, and that is, allow me to say why we cannot fail. It is not possible for us to fail. Even with the refinery, it is not possible for us to fail. Why? Because we have the raw material. We have crude. Number two, we have the market to buy the product. You know, we are currently importing the products from all over the place. So we have the market to sell. Number three, we have the capital to build it, to develop it. And we have the industrialists to help us run it. Why would we fail?
That's a fair question.
Amen.
President Museveni, I'd love to hear your perspective, especially as you're getting set to be an oil producer. How do you see this changing your economy, but also how do you assure beneficiation for your economy, as President Ruto was just speaking there? And the region, excuse me.
Our strategy is already clear. We shall build the small refinery which we had planned of 60,000, that will be 180,000. Because this was for the internal market of Uganda and for the parts of Tanzania and parts of Kenya which are near Uganda because of the transport costs. But the surplus oil we shall contribute to the East African refinery, the one of Tanga. And as I told you, this is just from 40% of one of the 5. So we have got more oil. So when that more oil comes, we shall contribute to the refinery in Tanga more, but also must own it also. It cannot be owned by the coastal states only. It must be owned by... regarding the other minerals, I can tell you, for instance, the uranium. We have got a lot of uranium. A Canadian company came and said, I want to take the uranium. So where are you taking it? To abroad. But I have had a rumor. What are you going to do with the uranium abroad? To generate electricity. But I have had a rumor that there are some human beings here. It's not confirmed, but I have had a rumor that there are some human beings here who need electricity. Why don't you start with those? The man disappeared. They never came back. So the uranium is in the ground. You, the grandchildren, you will get it out if we don't get it out. It's there for you. That's the same story with the gold. I banned the export of gold. Now there are how many refineries of gold now? There are now 9. Imagine this, the one we are producing in Busia, is it a kilo or what? No. The one they gave me, is it a kilo or what? Yeah, but what is it? The weight? Now, if you export gold unprocessed, 84% pure, you get $60,000 a kilo. If you process, like we have done in Busia, just on the other side of the border, you get $110,000. 160,000. 168,000. Now imagine.
Yeah.
From 60 to 168. All that money is lost.
Yeah.
And the jobs. And then there we are using our electricity.
Right.
You know, you the grandchildren, you must have heard of something we the elders call vertical integration.
Right.
Integrate from down up, but also horizontal.
Right.
Now, because we are purifying the gold in Uganda now, we can now also start a jewelry industry. Because now the gold is pure enough to be used in jewelry, to be used in bullion,
Right.
to be used in electronics. So it is really criminal to export. I cannot allow the export of unprocessed raw materials from Uganda. I cannot.
Right. Thank you so much, President Museveni. Aliko, please. And I think we're running out of time, but I'd love to hear from Aliko
Yes,
Samaila.
last word. Thank you very much. Well, it's great to be here, but since we have two of our leaders here, I would like to use this opportunity to thank them for their leadership. That's number one. Number two, especially, President Ruto to convince his colleagues to allow free movement of goods, services, and people. Because today, with an European passport, you can move faster in Africa than being an African, which I think we must really stop. So let them copy what Kenya did, because I remember I was here for his first inauguration. That was the time he allowed and removed visa-free for all Africans. Why can't we allow visa-free for all Africans? Please, we need to do that, because if we don't really do that, it will be difficult to trade with somebody that you cannot get in and out easily. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to just, Samaila, I'd love to hear from you, but I want to leave today with one commitment from everyone. We've heard a bit about what a few of you are discussing, but Samaila, maybe you start for us. What is the AFC committing today to this region moving forward?
So I would like to kind of double down on Alhaji Aliko's appeal. Free movement of people is definitely good, but I want, President Ruto, President Museveni to be advocates for the Africa we build. And I want you to be advocates in terms of the reforms that are required for us to be able to ensure that African capital resides within Africa for Africa's development. It is something that we can do. By the time we get into the round table, I would elaborate more, but it's something that requires leadership. And two of you are well placed to lead this initiative to ensure that we create African capital markets. It's very important. We will not develop if we don't create African capital markets.
Thank you.
And my commitment is to support whatever we agree, not just for today, but into the future. We are looking at what should regional integration look like in 10 years, and what are the building blocks that we must put in place today to ensure that happens. In our minds, it's not just infrastructure, it's also capital, which is why we're keen on having a conversation with all of you to ensure that happens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samaila. President Ruto, you said you want to be ambitious. What does that look like? What are you committing?
I think we are committing three things from where I sit. Number one is to continue to provide leadership at the highest level to support Africa's transformation by supporting the Africa we built.
What does that mean, though?
It means moving potential, moving ideas to projects and programs, real infrastructure projects. And in my listening to what the CEO of Africa Finance Corporation has said, is also to provide leadership at the policy level on making African capital agile, and available, so that whether it is monies we have in insurance companies, monies we have in pension funds, making sure that the capital markets work, like what we are doing at the Nairobi Securities Exchange, is for us to make it much more easy for us to use our own resources to drive our own transformation. And thirdly is to support this by getting fellow leaders in the continent to look at this perspective from where we are discussing today, so that we can get more people moving, reduce the bottlenecks and challenges that citizens, business people, entrepreneurs, industrialists come across as they cross borders, and to make sure that we take advantage of the market that we are. 1.5 billion people is a big asset, is a big resource that we can use. And finally, is to realize that by doing whatever we are doing, making sure that we industrialize our continent, we are actually tapping into the huge resource of young people that we have in our continent, because they are a potentially potent asset for us, turning them into a workforce and creating a bigger middle class out of these young people, by making sure that we engage them through industrialization by creating jobs. I think this is the commitment we will make as we go forward.
Thank you so much, President Ruto. President Museveni, what is your commitment that you're leaving with today?
What is?
Your commitment that you're leaving with today on this stage.
My what?
Commitment.
Commitment. The commitment of 65 years. You see, these young people now are joining me because for 65 years, African revolution has gone through three stages. 1912, ANC is founded in South Africa. 1940s, the Mandelas come on the scene. Mandela, Nyerere, Kenyatta. 1960s, our group. And now you people, you are there. Now, our historical missions were three. We are four initially. Liberation. Number two, prosperity. How do you get prosperity? Through economic integration. I am summarizing. The market. You cannot have prosperity without a united market. And united economic effort like we are talking about here. Historical mission number three, strategic security. To build strong armies. And that one can only be achieved through political integration. In the case of East Africa, we are talking about the East African Federation. But you don't concentrate on that, you are watching Arsenal.
I'm not watching Arsenal. I'm not watching Arsenal.
You are watching European clubs.
Right.
Now number four is the regional one of liberation. Are you from East Africa?
Yes.
You know some Swahili?
Yes.
When we
We're
are
running out of time, President, but yes, please.
When we were fighting, we were saying uhuru na umoja. Now when we go to uhuru na uhasama. Umoja disappeared. So now it is coming back. I'm very happy to see that I lived to see these people joining me, joining Mwalimu Nyerere, joining Nkrumah, joining the Pan-Africanists.
Right. Thank you so much, President Museveni. And I'm really over time, but Aliko, I'll give you the final word. We talk about markets, we talk about Pan-Africanism. I'm wondering if your commitment is this IPO that you are committed to. I mean, how much is deepening and strengthening African capital markets a part of your own commitment to where we're headed?
No, it's going to actually deepen the market, and we're saying that all Africans should invest and will be paying dividends in dollars. But my commitment today here is that if we agree with the 3-4 governments here about the refinery, we will lead and will make sure that that refinery is built within the next 4 or 5 years.
Wow. That's great. That is a positive way to end. I am so honored to be next to all of you, and thank you all so much for the time that you have spent listening to all of us, to Samaila Zubairo, the Africa Finance Corporation CEO, President William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, President Yoweri Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, and of course Aliko Dangote, President of the Dangote Group. Please join me in thanking them all.
And as they exit, I'll request that you kindly just have a photo opportunity. Let's take our seats briefly. Kindly, let's take our seats for the sake of the media. Kindly to have a photo opportunity with the 4 panelists. And after the first photo, we shall then ask Jennifer to also just step aside and then have the 4 panelists. Thumbs up for the first photo. Thank you, Jennifer. If I may kindly just request that we have the 4 panelists on their own, kindly. Thank you. Thank you. I'll then request that we all be upstanding. We're going to be winding up with the national anthem. I'll request that the 2 heads of state remain on stage. Kindly, the other 2 gentlemen, if we can step down. We'll finish with the 2 anthems, starting with the Ugandan national anthem and followed by the Kenyan anthem. And just for announcements, because after this we'll not have another chance, those participating in the round table proceed immediately to the 31st floor. You have to have the red overlay for you to do that. So kindly, let's proceed. Lunch will be served in the Mara Ballroom for the rest. Let us have now the 2 anthems, starting with the Ugandan anthem. I request that we maintain our positions as we allow the 2 heads of state to exit. And as they do so, those participating in the round table, please make your way to the round table room, which is on the 31st floor immediately. Lunch for us will be...